Hey, everybody. Welcome to Covendom. We are a live call-in occult podcast that you can watch through social media and on YouTube. My name is Levi Rowland, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Brian Kane. Both of us are high priesthood in the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft. And so we try to make this show from that perspective. But we also love having lots of different guests on. And today we have one of my favorite witches, Miss Judy Ann Nock. She will be joining us shortly after we get through our introductory material. So Judy is an author. Judy is everything, right? Judy is an author. She's a teacher, a lecturer. She's a metalsmith and a musician. Her books, she's written many books. Predominantly, she's written the Modern Witchcraft Guide series, which includes crystal magic, runes, magical herbs, natural magic, and the Wheel of the Year. All of these are separate books, and they're all fabulous. If you want to hear her music, she plays with Saint Divine and Psychopositive, and she is based in New York City. So we will be bringing her on shortly. And the way we do the show is that we tend to start with a little bit of occult news or news that we think is interesting to the magical community. And then we will have a occult presentation, which Brian will be doing today. He's back. See, he'll be with us. Don't worry. So we will be, I'll be starting with the news. But before I get into that, I just want to remind everybody that if you're watching us through Hex Education on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That's the channel that we broadcast through. If you're watching us on social media, such as Facebook or whatever live, please have, have a chance to go to YouTube and like and subscribe that channel, because that is where the archive of old episodes is. Anything you wanted to add, Brian, about upcoming festivals or anything like that?
I think you covered it very well.
Yes, we have WitchCon coming up. Buy your tickets late February. Judy will be teaching there. I will be teaching there. Brian will be teaching there. And then HexFest in August. So that was a lot. But today I didn't want to do traditional news, because we've been having a hard time finding like occult news things every single week. So I thought we would honor the fact that we are meeting today on the actual winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. I know we have a couple watchers in Australia. So happy midsummer to you.
You said that like it was a disease.
I know. Did I? Like, oh no, there are Australians amongst us. But no, we have some watchers from Australia and New Zealand, Antipodean witches. So happy midsummer to you. But for the rest of us, it is the dead of winter. It doesn't feel like it in New Orleans, but c'est la vie. So I thought instead of regular news, I would talk about some celebrations of the winter solstice that you might not know about. I think we all know sort of the Celtic inspiration for some of the winter solstice things. I think a lot of us know about Roman and Greek paganism and the worship of Sol Invictus and the invincible sun and all that. But there's winter solstice celebrations all over the world in the Northern Hemisphere right now. And the first one I wanted to talk about is the Dongja Festival, which is in China. And there's versions of it in other cultures that were influenced by China, so Korea and whatnot. And they really do see this as the sort of height of winter. It's a true midwinter kind of vibe. And so they eat a special dumpling that's made out of glutinous rice flour. They have meals with family. And it's really the arrival and the height of that. Some people will go to the local temple and pray as well. The one that I found that I thought was really cool was Yalda, also Yalda Night. And this is celebrated by lots of different ethnic communities in Iran, Kurdistan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, a lot of stands, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan. And it's based on the old Persian calendar from the Zoroastrian religion, but it's carried through Syriac Christians, Muslims of Shia and Sunni variety. And it is the midwinter festival. It's the festival of the winter solstice. And I really like this. They meet together as a family. They have a huge meal, and then they read poetry all night long and wait to sort of like see the rising of the first sun after the death of the long night of the year. So I think that's really beautiful. And they save red fruits from the summer, like watermelon or pomegranate, and they will eat those to remind themselves of the light of summer, and because red is a blessing, which I thought was really cool. And then I have two more. I have Soyal, which is from the Hopi people. There are other tribes in the Southwest that also celebrate this, indigenous tribes to the U.S., but it is a night of lengthy prayer and purification rituals to bring in the blessings of ancestral spirits that are believed to visit on the solstice night, on the longest and darkest night of the year, which I think is cool. And then in Japan, they have Toji, which is not really an official festival. It's more of a season or a feel. And they will bathe in citrus, like in public baths, like yuzu. They'll cut it up and put it in the water so they can be reminded of the light of summer in the darkness. And then many people will go to renew themselves at Shinto shrines. So you bathe in citrus water, have a sort of purifying moment, and then go and pray at the shrine. So those are what I found. Just some, perhaps, hopefully, some things that you hadn't heard of that are not the traditional sort of like in Ireland they did this. I kind of wanted to find something new. But with that, I will pass it. I feel like I've been talking long. I will pass it to Brian for our occult demonstration.
Well, for my demonstration, Levi just ruined the whole thing. So I'm going to go
Did I
down.
steal it?
I'm going to be down in the store in about 10 minutes with birch sticks to beat the crap out of him.
Did I? Is this what you did too?
Kind of, yes. So here's my occult demonstration. So Holly, right? So yeah, it's the winter solstice, and I was thinking, whenever we're doing this sort of thing, the news has been a bit hard lately. Just not much a lot going on, really. You can't control that.
Like, what's going on real world wise?
Yeah. We're trying to do stuff like, something like a discovery or something in the occult world or civil rights or, something current. There's not a lot of, everything's calm right now in the world of witchcraft, apparently. That's not a bad thing. However, when we do the occult demonstrations, it's also sort of, is everyone going to be, today's going to be a problem, I can already tell.
You can smell it in the air, Brian.
Everything's going to be a problem. Like right when I started to get ready for the show, everything went weird. So someone will come knock on the door real quickly, I'm sure. Anyway, we think about what's relevant, and of course it's the winter solstice, the boom, right? Like we're actually meeting pretty close to the actual solstice here today. So I was actually reflecting on that because we have our store rituals that we do. And sorry, Tiki, what is happening? Do you want to talk to the people? No. Anyway, so I was reflecting on the solstice anyway, because we're in that time. Like, we've got our coven rituals. I've got the store ritual, it's just in the zeitgeist. And then we're meeting today. So one of the things that I did this year was I acquired way too much holly. Like I have a lot of holly. If you need some, come over. So I was actually reminded of this tradition because we all grew up with it. Even if you were Christian, holly is in your mind being associated with Christmas because it's in the decorations, it's on the wrapping paper. You might not know it's there. But there's this woman that I like to watch, and she is a Tudor historian, the Tudors like Anne Boleyn and all that sort of thing. And I don't know why, I find it fascinating. And so she had a little episode where she was talking about Tudor Christmas and the decorations. And I'd already had this, but it was like kind of funny because I think about this kind of thing all the time. One of my favorite soapboxes is to make fun of academics because sometimes sometimes they're idiots, so you'll get, I'm not going to name any names because that's not what this is about, but I could name some names really quickly off the tip of my tongue of people who will, and Levi's aware of this because sometimes they're right, but you'll get people saying Easter is named after Ishtar, and then you'll get the really smart guy coming on saying, no, it's not, and the smart guy's right about that one. Correct. But it's a game that goes on about everything. So like, for instance, one of my favorite things is when you'll get somebody saying, ooh, Queen Victoria created the Christmas tree. It wasn't even a real thing. It's never pagan. Queen Victoria created that. And it's like, no, she didn't. She because her husband was German, and it was a German Christmas tradition to bring in a Christmas tree. She brought it to England and made it more popular. Actually, there was a queen before her who was German who did it way before she did, but it was Queen Victoria, and Albert was German, and they were trying to do this whole thing. So just because the Christmas tree wasn't old in England doesn't mean it didn't exist somewhere else. So you'll get this pseudo historian who will know this little fact, because it's all about, which Levi loves to say this too, where they like to dissect everything, show the innards, and sometimes it's just mass chaos without any actual context of understanding. So they'll take one little piece of misinformation and make that their thesis to say the whole thing's unraveled. Well, unravel this. So I don't know why. Holly is a very popular tradition from England to Germany. It's kind of a common tradition in Western Europe, probably because it grows, I'm assuming, in all those places, and it passed along with their ancestors. But one of the things that they did in Tudor England was they didn't have a Christmas tree, but they would bring in holly and ivy and decorate their houses with holly and ivy. And the tradition was to actually keep it up had to be removed by Candlemas. We're talking about Tudor England. We're talking about Christians, right? But the superstition was if you didn't remove the holly by Candlemas, you could get goblins in your house. You know, you know, because one of the myths was bringing holly in was inviting the fairies to live in your house during the winter months. But you didn't keep them in there till after Candlemas. I don't know why. You
February, evicted.
Yeah, yes. Obviously, in our modern thesis, there's a lot of different symbols for the holly. You know, some of you might be familiar with the term the Holly King, or the oak and the Holly King. This is coming from the mythos of like the robin and the wren, or the battling kings that represent the seasons, you know. And so holly was also a symbol of that. So mistletoe, you'd all be aware of, you know, well, it's because it's from the oak tree. So this was all about bringing in, so mistletoe is from a tree, and we were bringing something from a tree into our house from the Druids. I mean, no one's going to say that that's not really connected, but, you know, you get a small leap. Ooh, somebody made up the Christmas tree. It's not actually pagan. The Christmas tree is pagan. The whole idea of bringing greenery into your house by whatever form it is going to be comes from our ancestors, and it's a common practice. You know why? Well, find a reason for it, I suppose. For me personally, I mean, this means many things, but bringing it into the house is just a wonderful way to remind yourself about nature. You know, going outside would be better, sure, but you know, we live in a concrete world, right? So I had two ideas about this today. I was going to say, what's the magical demonstration? So I'm going to say what some of the things that people did with holly. So you could bring it in, because obviously it was for protection, I'm assuming, because the spiky leaves, you know. Red, Levi was talking about red. Red features very prominently in everything Christmas. You know, that's I mean, even how we dress Santa Claus, right? So I think that's a common color for blood and life. You know, and we're talking about a lot of different things. So this weaves into, you know, this has Druidic meanings, but it also has Christian meanings, because we just kept changing the story.
Yeah,
so it becomes the crown of thorns, the blood of Christ. You know, it's got, you know, and that's how we do things as people. We will take a symbol that has been very old and we'll change its story. But a common practice that people would do with holly, and continued to do through Christian times, was to actually burn some of it in their hearth fire. And those ashes were used as holy ashes, and in some cases would be taken into a certain time of year where you might put them on your forehead. You know, so once again, going back to that weird tradition that's linking up with Christians, Christmas and Candlemas.
Yeah.
You know, and you've got this plant that's featuring from Christmas all the way to Candlemas, or I don't know, you were Catholic. When is Ash Wednesday?
Ash Wednesday is the beginning of Lent,
which is close to February, right?
Usually.
Yeah.
Usually. Yeah.
It moves around. I wasn't Catholic. Levi's a better Catholic than me. But so I just wanted to say, bring in some greenery. That's the tradition, right? That's the ancient thing. It doesn't matter whether it's a Christmas tree or whether it's a piece of holly or whether it's ivy. There's these different symbols, but that was the old tradition, and it is pre-Christian. Trees are pre-Christian.
I feel like it's a very fascinating quote. Trees, by the way, pre-Christian. Did you know? Did everybody know trees?
Well, I mean, I think it's very easy for someone to take a little fact, like obviously we don't have any evidence that the Celts were bringing trees into their houses, right? And they probably weren't, because if you think about it, it's kind of a lot of work, right? But for some reason, the Germans were bringing trees in their houses. But but the common thing was, you know, I don't know about you, but I think one of the first things I heard was that we used to decorate the trees outside. And I think that's probably true, because if you go to like Ireland or whatever, we still do that today. We put ribbons
Including-
on fairy trees, offerings. So I think there's a crossover here. You know, when did it become decor? Well, that's probably Queen Victoria. But you'll get this academic person who will take that like little fact and then try to blow the whole thing up. You know, and I think it was last episode, Levi was saying, I think it was last
Honey, the trees. Honey, the trees are pre-Christian.
You were saying, but this is the magic of it. You were saying it's simple. It can be simple.
It can be simple.
Truth is simple, and that's the truth. Trees are pre-Christian.
Trees are pre-Christian, everybody. There were trees before the turn of before they turned those clocks to BCE to CE. Can you believe it?
Yeah. So I would encourage you, if you can get some holly, that's a really beautiful tradition. Ivy is the other one. Those are the two popular ones, and I've got my reasons why I think those were the thing. I would associate ivy with the goddess, and I associate holly with the god.
Look up where you live, though, because English ivy is insanely invasive in certain parts of the U.S. and it will ruin your garden.
Yeah.
So check that out because it can be wildly invasive.
I'm not suggesting you transplant things.
Don't transplant it. Well, thank you for
this
that.
does actually grow here, though. So
Yeah, holly does here.
I didn't get this here, but there's actually a holly bush across the street here. And I've actually never, this is the first time in my life I ever actually saw holly in person, because where I was born in Washington, we had all the Ogham trees.
Mhm.
What we didn't have is holly, and we did not have hazel. So you could get beech wood, which is related to hazel, but hazel didn't grow there. Weirdly enough, it's all over Seattle though. So if you go outside in other parts of Washington, there's hazel everywhere. But so those were the two I couldn't get. So I was really, when I got here in New Orleans, almost none of them exist here, but this one does. We have willow here. We don't like willow because, well, it's really bad for the sewer pipes and everything, I guess.
Yes.
And then oak trees. But
The
some of our oak trees aren't really oak trees, but we call them oak trees.
They're their own thing.
Fun, random facts. New Orleans has weird trees. But anyway, happy solstice, everyone.
Happy solstice. So before I bring Judy on, just a reminder, if you want to ask us a question, you can call in at 309-463-3377. Judy will be a part of the panel too. That's 309-GODDESS. You also can put in the chat. I see all your lovely comments and all of your solstice blessings. So thank you, Jen and Velis and Shelley and Ongon Saint-Jacques and everyone else. We're very happy that you are here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring on a witch after my own heart, which is Miss Judy Ann Nock. Hello, Judy.
Happy solstice.
Happy solstice. I'm so glad that you're here. So I went through your intro, but if there's anything that I missed or you'd like people to know or give a little
context. It was so thorough. It was
tried.
flatteringly thorough. Thank you.
Levi stole my show. I'm like, Levi, that is not news. You're taking my occult demonstration.
I did the winter solstice, but we met on it. Judy said
I wasn't going to talk about the Buddhists. So
Brian, are you calling? Brian is calling.
I was trying to see if his phones worked.
Because Judy, he thinks that I won't answer people sometimes when he's not here. And so he just popped up Brian Kane, and I was like, Brian.
No, he's admitted to it before. So if he gets, because at the store, I can't see the chat because I don't wear readers, but I don't do it on the show. And so at the store, I can't see like here, I could see the chat, but the store, I can't see the chat. So if he sees a question he doesn't want me to answer, he just doesn't bring it up because it's
we all need a little
because he knows I could be a problem. That's why.
Professional distance.
Professional distance is the best way to put it, Judy. I'm so happy you're here, Judy. And so I thought, if you didn't mind, since we all prepped questions and stuff, this is going to be a very coffee table. We're going to go over things together and answer things from the chat too, I'm sure. If you'd be okay answering the first question.
Ooh, yes, hit me.
I know, since I want to bring you out of the show and welcome you in. So we're talking a lot about natural magic and living witchcraft, and that's sort of the theme of our show tonight. And so this is something I think about a lot.
Magic, I think I called it.
Yes. So my question, and we'll start with you, Judy. Nature can sometimes be cruel, right? So as witches, we're very inspired by nature. We take a lot of we say often, like, you hear people say things like nature is my God or nature is my theology. But nature can be pretty violent and pretty cruel. So how do we balance loving nature with compassion?
You have to first accept the ambivalent nature of it. As human beings, we have this tendency to want to ascribe value judgments to everything. So this kind of like directs our moral compass. Like we think of things as like right or wrong, good and bad, or kind or cruel. And we do see this duality present in nature, but duality is not the only law of nature. There are also laws of chaos. For order, there is disorder. And I think when you are dealing with the forces of nature, it's extremely humbling. You realize the extent of power. You take water, for example. Water is the cradle of life. It is incredibly destructive. Incredibly destructive. Same thing with fire. Fire sustains us. Fire illuminates. We use it in candle magic. We think of the heart as the hearth. Also a very, very destructive force. So I think when you approach nature as an aspect of witchcraft, you have to accept the entirety of its power and also its ambivalence to you.
Oh, yeah. Brian, would you add anything to that?
Will you reframe the question for me one more time? I got lost in her words.
It was that I loved that answer, but if
I'm like, oh, got to follow that.
I know right now Brian has to follow you, Judy. If we are lovers of nature as witches and we draw on nature for our religion, how do we balance our own compassion with the fact that nature can be quite cruel?
Well, I mean, obviously, first of all, I'm going to reframe this, that in the original witchcraft revival, we didn't really think of it as a nature religion. That's something that is true because of the fact that there's a link there. We're working through the agricultural seasons. We're working with fertility because, contrary to popular belief, witchcraft has elements of a fertility cult to it. So that links us to nature, where everything we do, the moon, the sun, the seasons. So obviously it's there, right? Nature is nature. It speaks for itself. And in the rituals of the craft, we certainly do tune in to things we might consider cruel. There are elements of, there's certain things I can't quite say. I'm trying to, but there are elements of the ritual where we're expressing love, we're expressing life, birth, death, and what could be considered cruel. It's just facing our mortality, really, isn't it? Because it is cruel. It is cruel from a certain perspective, as Judy was sort of saying, in our minds. And I guess, because I don't really know, that we're here to learn something. We're here to experience something and learn something. And I think we all chose to be here, or we needed to be here to learn this mortality, to learn about that cruelty, because you can't really learn about love unless you learn about cruelty. We wouldn't have the positive side of things. We wouldn't have that celebratory joy. I think one of the things Christian used to say about New Orleans, which I think is very true, is this city was wrapped in death. It was a penal colony. It's a swamp. Everything about this place seems like it would be tragedy. Yet it's known for the endless party, because it's sitting so next to death that the joy,
it's almost like you come back around
louder, right? So I think we need the cruelty, we need the dark side to have that balance, to have that. And I think the craft, when you're working the rituals of the craft, it's all there if you're paying attention. There are some very sad moments. We just approach it with joy. So I think it's about understanding we're going to have, bad things happen. One of my favorite jokes is, there's probably lots of people putting curses on me, and one of them will work eventually because something bad's going to happen to me, and then I'll take credit for it. Because something bad is going to happen to all of us eventually. There's going to be some bad moments,
Yeah.
We know that. And knowing that is extremely empowering. So I think it's just nature is reality. And we live in a society where people don't want to face that reality. Like we don't live in reality. We're looking at our phones. We create the universe we want to in our minds. We try to bend people to our wills so that they will be forced to validate our existence, basically. And the reality of it is it's all illusion. Like, we're here, we're pumping blood, and we're all going to die. In 50 years,
welcome everybody.
yeah, we're all going to die. So, in 50 years, most of us will be gone. So that's that. So
not to cut
sorry,
you
I don't know how to express that.
No, I didn't want to cut you off, but both of you, I love both of what you said, and it reminded me of this joke I said on the show earlier. My husband loves the sitcom Mom, and there's one of the characters in it. They're at an AA meeting, and this person is like, "I just feel like God is trying to kill me," and this woman goes, "Honey, God's got a plan to kill us all." God has got a plan to kill us all. But I love that. So
you learned today that trees are pre-Christian, and you're all going to
trees die. Are pre-Christian, and we're all going to die. But Judy, following up on what you said, do you think that makes it harder sometimes? Like, how do I word this? Sometimes I think that in the modern magical community, we really do have these two poles sometimes, where you have this this very intense connection to nature. Brian, you brought this up too. Where we worship through the seasons, we have this very intense connection to the living and dying world. But then we also have this influence of the New Age community, which is sometimes, not always, I don't want to be negative here, but like toxically positive, right? Like they don't want to accept negativity ever. You can think your way out of any bad thing ever. Do you think there's a tension there, Judy?
I definitely think so. And I say that as a person who has been accused of toxic positivity, which was one of the more surprising criticisms that I got. And it was in response.
Yes, whoever said that never met you.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Like, it's interesting to know how it comes off, because this was someone that wrote like a review of my Crystal Magic book, which is the first book that I feel I had the opportunity to write with pure joy. So just because of the Hand of Fate, most of the profoundly wonderful experiences and opportunities I've had have come at a time during intense personal crisis. So I've never had that experience of being able to write freely without, some tragedy going on in my life. And so for like the first time I'm able to do that, I get called out for this toxic positivity that it didn't really fit. And, going back to that earlier question about the cruelty of nature, I'm not sure that it's cruelty. I think it's ambivalence. Now, we all have roots in the deep South, and there's a saying there that the hurricane is only as bad as your house. So, and that's a big reason of like why, we practice magic. I work with runes a lot, and historical use of runes were like safety in travels, protection from the elements, because we're all just trying to survive. Because to, Brian's point, we are these blood pumping, visceral, electric beings, experience the world through our vibrational energy, our voice, the projection of our thoughts that we receive as sound. It's fascinating. We cannot separate, like ourselves from nature, but we try to protect ourselves from it. So the New Agey stuff is something that, I do constantly try to reconcile, because like I came of age and I came into the path at a time when that was really, really big. So I got immersed in that when I was young, because that's what was going on in the world. And now that I've been here for a minute, I've seen it change a lot. So first it was New Age, and then it was earth-based spirituality. And then it changed again to like supernatural, ancient mysteries. And now I'm falling under the category of like self-transformation. So I'm seeing this kind of like distillation from very, very broad concepts to very, very individualistic concepts.
The market.
But it is something that I struggle with, like that New Age positivity, and being accused of that was surprising. So surprising.
It's worse to be accused of, really, isn't there?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the worst thing they can say about you is that you're positive.
All I have in my head right now is because I've got my sense of humor is here tonight, and I just want to say I don't know anything about this. I'm just a Wiccan.
Oh yeah. So, yeah, honey, I told Brian
we're
this.
We're going to talk about that. I have questions. Well, I have so many questions about that.
The reason I told this is because I like you, Judy, have this experience of being in these different, not communities. I've always just been Alexandrian, but like, sometimes you're hanging around people who are really into ceremonial magic. So magic is only in the language of the occult revival. And then sometimes you're with people who are pagan reconstructionists and it's only in the language of that, right? And I agree with you.
Kristen wants us to know no one ever accuses him of toxic.
No one has ever accused Christian of being toxically positive ever. But I've seen that transformation too. And I don't know. I think, well, the word Wicca, the joke was, the reason that Brian made that joke is because sometimes I get so irritated when I'm being like talked down to by somebody, which happens a lot in the magical community. They assume you don't know things if you're a witch, as opposed to like a Golden Dawn magician or whatever. And so I've just started doing this thing where I go, I don't know, honey, I'm just a Wiccan. Like, just to make them stop, because they all, I don't know, sweetheart, I'm just a Wiccan, so that I can watch them be uncomfortable. But if you don't mind, how about we let Judy ask the next question?
Why, I'd be delighted. Thank you. So one of my questions for this incredibly knowledgeable panel was, when we look at like historical accounts of witchcraft, a lot of them were written by people who were seeking to eradicate witchcraft.
Yep.
So in your experience, or in your opinion, how much does the modern iterations of witchcraft reflect the historical records?
I mean, it's definitely there, and we've talked about this. There's a mythos around witchcraft. And so everything about the history, from the trial records to folklore, definitely impacted the modern witchcraft revival, and it's part of the mythos, which is in every religion, and one of the things that I've said, Levi, I've talked about, is we don't really think it matters if some of these things are true or not. What matters is the fact that it's found its way to live in the world through our meat sacks, but it is a part of our myth. Now, witch as a mythos, regardless of how you want to break it down, is not pre-Christian. It's not as old as the tree, and it exists in this state of persecution. It exists as a subversive cult in its mythos, whether you believed it was the cult of Diana or whether you believed it was the cult of Satan. It existed as a religious idea that was counterculture to the establishment, right? So we're still in that world. We still live in a Christian country. We still live in a Christian world, really, in the West. And so witchcraft still pervades that. And I think particularly in today's age, I think that people are way more scared of a goddess than they are the devil. And I think there still is a counterculture aspect to it. So that myth is still very relevant. Obviously, there are things in witch trials that aren't true.
Yeah.
And may have never been true. But what it teaches us is that people believed it was true. People believed, and like one of the rabbit holes to go down is that the church wasn't persecuting witches. Like, that's a mythos in itself. They were persecuting devil-worshipping heretics. The King James Bible and the work of the 1930s is what made it all about witchcraft, because English became the dominant language in the world. I think it's still up there somewhere, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's just our narrative, and because we're English-speaking people, most of us in America only speak one language, contrary to other countries where they usually are, Levi. So people who have more, who was it, Levi? You used to say to translate is treason. That was
the old French idiom, traduire c'est trahir, to translate is treason.
This is why I keep him around. So he it doesn't always translate. So you've got this myth going on, but the myth was about a religion, and the myth of that religion started out being like, these people are worshiping Diana, and then later it was, these people are worshiping the devil, and we've got to stomp out this evil religion. Was there a massive cult that was worshiping the devil? No, probably not. Were there people worshiping the devil? Probably. When I go and look at the witch trials or look at these ideas, none of that happened. Somebody tried it. This was a mythos that everyone knew about. Whether you lived in Ireland or you lived in Germany, people knew somebody went in the woods and said some words and tried to conjure up the devil, and they tried to kill people with pins or whatever. Somebody tried it. We would have all tried it. Like everyone here, if we were medieval, we would be like, I'm going to go in the woods to see if this works out. So, you know, like whatever the mythos was, whether you were contacting the fairies or Diana or the devil, somebody tried it. And there were probably groups of people that tried it. So I think that witch cult hypothesis is very relevant to the modern revival and the work that we do today. It's just been reframed, repackaged, but the heart of it is very, very much the same. If a person from medieval England came across one of our circles, they would know we were practicing witchcraft. They would know what to accuse us of.
I'm going to be really blunt to your question, Judy. I don't care. I don't care if it's literally true anymore, because I believe it to be true in the way poetry is true, right? Or, you know, I do believe that there is something in the human heart in Western Christendom that rebelled against the tyranny of the church. And I do think that it carried with it old memory, and even sort of, not to be too Jungian about this, but sort of like the sort of collective unconscious, the sort of memory, you know, in the body of what it used to be like to be, you know, to worship at festivals, or to be able to ask a lesser spirit than the creator of the universe to, you know, to fix your life or whatever. And I approach it. I don't approach it as history. You know, she was not correct in her thesis, Miss. You know who I'm talking about. And Margaret Murray. Yeah, she was not correct.
Leave her alone.
Yeah, Margaret Murray was not correct, and you know she's been debunked.
She wasn't correct about everything. She wasn't correct about everything.
But I think here's the thing. I think it's unfair. I think we as witches are held to this ridiculous standard that no other religion is. Like the Nicene Council was a fairy tale in the sense of like early Christianity was unbelievably diverse. There was no such thing as Christianity. There were tons of different Christianities that believed crazy wacko shit that modern Christians would not be able to recognize. That there were magical archons that you had to beat by knowing the secret name of Mary Magdalene, and I mean, like, just crazy stuff. And so by imperial decree, you end up with a council that creates Orthodox Christianity, not naturally, not holistically. It's forced on people, and then of course it wins because they kill the people who don't agree. Like, you know, they have a witch hunt basically. So no religion has this. Every religion plays with myth and plays with story. And how come we have to be, you know, as modern witches, how come we have to be held to the fire about like the historicity of whatever when nobody else does?
Right.
You know, and Judy, we'll give you the last word on this one for your own question. What do you think is the link between the historical witch trials and modern praxis?
Well, I really enjoyed your responses, and it made me think of something. I mean, we could continue like on this line of thought, but this whole, you know, conflation of, you know, witchcraft with devil worship. And I wonder if that's because even when you cast a worldview in opposition, and you have this veneration of the feminine divine aspect, if, you know, the religious leaders of the time just could not reconcile that at all and had to ascribe a male deity, even if it was a malevolent one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of the
could not accept any form of feminine power.
It must be Satan.
So that it must be.
And that's literally what happens. Like you can see it in the church records. At first, they were like, these people are worshiping Diana. And then as time went on, you know, you'd get the feminine decreasing and decreasing from it being a known goddess to a queen of fairies to eventually just being the witch with Satan.
Or the devil's wife or whatever, like always submissive. Right?
So I think that's very true. And as far as like, if you want to play with history, when the church was doing this, there were people alive that knew initiates of the cult of Isis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were still people whose grandparents knew about this monotheistic world goddess religion and other religions like it, because at the end of when Rome fell, mystery cults were the big thing. Religion wasn't the way we think it was. So like a lot of people in the pagan community want to think it was about the Druids and the Celts and the Christians came and killed everyone. No, it had already changed the game. Paganism was already like in civilized places kind of having its own evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a real threat of this feminine monotheistic religion that was a religion that had a goddess who was front and center, who was the goddess of magic, and her consort sometimes had horns, and he had a pitchfork too. His name was Serapis, and he had a beard and a pitchfork, and everyone wants to give it to Pan. I'm like, what about Serapis? Because Serapis was a big deal when the church was rising into power, you know, and the pagans that the church had to deal with that were a threat were pagans with power. Not to offend my Celtic ancestors, but they weren't worried about what we were doing in the trees with our sticks at that point in time. They were worried about who had temples and who had money and who could possibly raise an army, you know. And Levi's really good at this. He knows some of the last emperors swayed back and forth, you know. So people remember this. So when the church was forming these things by decree, that was the pagans in their mind. Powerful, educated, goddess worshipping priesthood, you know, and they didn't want to see that come back.
No. Oh. Both of you, I would add, like, the fact that it was women, I think, is really important. And I want to bring up, not to get on a political soapbox, but there is this massive push in social media right now, particularly for young men, to return to Christianity right now. I don't know if either of you are following this, but it's alarming, right? It is a very toxic form. It is not gentle Jesus, meek and mild. It is a very, like, poisonous form of Christianity. And it is rooted in such deep misogyny. Like, and it's just wild to watch. And they do this thing that I think is so dishonest. I don't know if any of you remember when Tom Holland, not the actor, the historian, he wrote a book called Dominion, the history of, you know, which is about the history of Christendom. And it's a puff piece on Christianity, basically, where it's like Christianity made everything better for women. It made everything better for minorities because the Roman Empire was cruel and vicious and misogynistic and horrible, which in some ways it was. But it is such a puff piece of history, and people are really swallowing it. It's all over social media, of this, like, rewriting of our history, that Christianity was the salvation for the poor woman. And it's like, that's not true. Like, I mean, like, so I like that you both brought that up. I think it's important to remember.
Well, thank you.
Whitewashed history, really, isn't it?
It's incredibly whitewashed history. So, Brian, I think you're up for a question if you want to ask Judy one.
Well, I'm going to ask both of you. Mm-hmm. What is something you do every day magically?
Ooh.
If you don't mind sharing.
I would have to say every day I engage with talismans. So enchanted objects, physical things that have a certain energy signature. Definitely. Crystals, jewelry, mirrors, without fail every day. Yes.
Oh, I like that. I would say that something I do every day magically, and it happens before I go to sleep, is I'm very into this idea of having an astral temple, right? Like a space mentally where I can go. It's very similar to like a memory palace, if you've ever done that, where you construct a space in your mind that is sacred, right? And you can use that to do work, basically. You know, Franz Barden, for example, suggests, I don't do this personally, but Franz Barden suggests that you relive your day backwards every night in your memory palace or in your astral temple. But I tend to focus on particular symbols, or I love the idea of imprinting symbols in the astral mind. You know, this idea that you're imprinting something in your agoades or your astral body, you know, all that old occult kind of lingo. I really like all that stuff. So I think that's a big one for me daily, is it helps me remember that, yes, the real world is important, but also we are in spiritual practices that believe that consciousness expands. I like to be reminded of that. Keeps from getting too small. What about you, Brian?
Well, last night my catchphrase was like, because I was with somebody who was talking about it a lot, I kept saying everything was chaos magic. So as a chaos magician, I don't do anything every day. But I do have practices that I do often. You know, I'm probably not regimented enough to do anything every day. But one of the things I actually like to do is to approach magic sometimes in the same way you would just approach your life. So in the morning, I like to have a glass of water before I do anything else. I'm a coffee person, but I always have one glass of water before I do anything else. And when I'm mindful, to sound all toxic positivity, when I'm being mindful, I will bless the water, and I will approach the water as a renewing substance, and I drink that water, and it's the first thing I do. So I don't do that every day, but I notice when I do it, things just seem to go better. So because you're approaching your day and just this substance that we're constantly in contact with and giving it its moment, you're having a relationship with this element that is so crucial to us, and it's just a really good way to start your day. So have a glass of water. It's not only good for
I
you.
love the honesty of that. I love the honesty of that response, because it did take me a second. I was like, ooh, every day. What is it that I do every day? Because there's a lot of things that I do, but it was like the everyday part. I was just like, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because it's like there's things I always tell people this, like, what are your daily practices? Well, I don't really have daily practices. Yeah. I have things I will do more often that could be my daily practices. You know, I work out. Do I do it every day? No, I don't. If I did it every day, I'd have more success. But the point of it is, it's something I do often, you know. So yeah, I don't think you really need a daily practice, but because anything you're going to do, you have to like want to do it. But the reality of it is, something like that is the key. Probably most of you have a glass of water in the morning, you know, and so it's not a hard thing.
Black coffee, but you know, it's in water. It's in water.
Coffee is like a dark brew, right?
So you can
say,
yes, I don't.
You know, earth magic.
Earth magic all the way. Grounded.
Earth, air, water.
Grounding myself in my panic attacks. No, I'm kidding. I think it's my turn, and I'm going to kind of force the hand on this one. I'll start with you, Judy, because then I'm going to ask a question, and I know you're going to say it's a mix of both, but I'm going to press both of you to choose a side, basically. What do you think, honestly, is most important to you as a practitioner of magic? The ability to be spontaneous or disciplined?
Okay, this is going to be a little like counterintuitive to how I see myself, but I'm going to come down for discipline. And that's something that I came to realize quite recently. I do consider myself a very spontaneous person, except in dealings of magic. And then I am very disciplined. Well, I will consider every word, every color, everything is carefully planned out to the point where it's scripted and repeated. And that is a real moment of power when you have done the work, when you have engaged in that level of specificity, when you have like planned out a working from start to finish. Leaving things spontaneous is valuable. But since you asked me to pick a side, I'm picking discipline.
I like that. What about you, Brian?
I kind of have to mimic her because when you said that, all my fairy blood started going spontaneity. But in the truth of the matter, as you know, Levi, I think discipline is extremely important. And particularly for someone like myself, because I don't think I am a particularly disciplined person. So I have to work at it. And shut up, you. But how I approach craft, as you would know, Levi, is quite disciplined. So, you know, I do love that about the structure of craft and the training. I had a really good teacher. I modeled myself after her, and teaching and learning in a priesthood requires discipline. You know, that's just part of the game. So, however, I do think there's an element of magic where there should always be a bit of a surprise, you know. So I love both, but I think you can't really, existing in magic as complete spontaneity would be just being an insane person. Because there would be no control, there would be no safety measures, there would be no rules at all, and everything would just go amok. Like, I think there's plenty of people out in the world who are doing that for us. So the best magicians are disciplined.
Both of you mentioning this, I think, is so funny, because I actually think this is something you see in so many occult history biographies and stuff, is that somebody will be this like being of absolute chaos. And then, but when it comes to their magic, they're very Crowley was like this. You know, you'll read things about him where people would expect him to be a loose cannon and kind of crazy, and he was. And then they would get in ritual, and he would be like this strict disciplinarian with like, why didn't you memorize all 42 questions?
I feel like you're talking about me. I feel like you're just saying Crowley.
Alex is like that too. Alex Sanders was known for that
You're
too.
called out. You're so called out.
So many occultists are like that, where they can be like these chaotic beings, but then you get them in a circle and they're like, oh no, it's every single thing has to be perfect. It's like disciplinarian and fairy.
I think it's important because
I know you have to both.
You're trying to wield power, and in any circumstance where you're trying to wield power, whether it's a fire or magic, kind of have to be.
Like what you said, Judy. Fire and water, we think of them as just plain elements, but if you ever lived through a hurricane or a brush fire, I don't know whose turn it is to ask a question.
I think it's yours.
No,
to answer your own question.
No, he just asked one.
Oh, I agree. I won't to answer my own. It's discipline, 100%, because I think we all know why. Because magic requires a certain level of consciousness, right? But beyond that, I think maybe it's Judy's turn to ask a question.
Okay. So I have a question. It's about witchcraft, and historically, secrecy has been a big tradition amongst practitioners. So as authors, how do you reconcile that traditional construct of secrecy with things like book publishing and public works and such?
Levi, would you like to go first?
I am very honest in everything. I feel like it was easier for me because I wrote a book on astrology, which is not necessarily witchcraft, and then I wrote a book on goddess worship, which I don't think belongs to craft. It's like a bigger movement. But I'm going to be a little bit of a hard ass here and maybe sound a little conservative. I do think that it's better. I think the less that you divulge of your practice, the better. I do. I think that divulging technique is one thing. That's different. Like if, Judy's books teaching you how to, use these things and how to interact with them correctly and whatnot. Getting where you're straight up showing people your altar or like workings that you're doing, I think is very toxic to praxis. I just do. I don't, and this is not even just, it's not even the occultist in me. It's not even the BTW initiate Wiccan in me. Like it straight up is like psychological. This is a thing that is known in psychology where the more that you talk about things, you do take power away from them. Think about the person in your life who is constantly telling you they're finishing a novel. It's all they talk about. They write publicly in a coffee shop. They can't stop talking about it. They don't tend to actually publish novels. Or the person who's always talking about going back to college to finish a particular degree or whatever. The more that you talk about it instead of doing it, that balance can go wonky real quick. So technique, history, all fun for the game. Actual literal magic that you're doing, you shouldn't be telling anybody about that.
Brian?
No, I'm going to rake Levi across the coals. As an Alexandrian, I come from a long line of people who took pictures of their altars and put them on.
That's not what I mean. No. I don't mean altar as in like this is what an altar looks like. I mean an act of working.
I get it. I knew what you meant.
That's what I'm talking about.
But my first thing's popping in my brain is I have a picture of my altar in my book.
Not with an act of work.
I knew what you meant, but I'm schooling you anyway. So when it comes to magic, I don't ever, even in the coven, we will not discuss magic, even with another member if they were not there. We don't discuss it at all, actually. So we like to. I'm sorry, Levi, I didn't embarrass you.
No, you're fine.
I love you. So Levi was talking about people who post on their Instagram, "Here's my spell," and here's this, here's my witch art, and it's not going to work. That's an old thing. To know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. It's not just in craft. Secrecy has been a tradition that has been upheld by many religions. Even Greek Orthodoxy and to some degree Catholicism has their secret mysteries. Where I think one of the things I like about the Greek church is it retains that inner sanction, that sanctum, Levi, the inner temple, which comes from the old Egyptian things where they would have this room, this space where everyone knew it was there, but you weren't allowed to go into it. Only like the high priest or whoever would go into it. And just, I think the knowledge of that there was something you couldn't know creates and generates power, And so when it comes to your spell work or whatever, secrecy is a must, right?
Yep.
But what I think people don't realize, because of the fact the word witch is this huge thing right now that corporations are selling, and I don't mean like my kind of corporation, I mean real corporations. Amazon is making a lot of money off witchcraft. I'm probably part of the problem. So, it's true. Like, we've all done it, haven't we? So I run witchcraft stores, but I have ordered things on Amazon. And so it's, or I love Etsy. Etsy is a guilty pleasure, really, isn't it? So in that sense, like my book, that was a challenging thing. I wrote 2 books about witchcraft, and in each one, I was trying to educate people about British traditional witchcraft, the witchcraft revival, without like just regurgitating this conversation that's gone on for 70 years now, and so that was the challenge. But to be honest, I don't think I published anything that other than the pictures that really betray anything about my real practice. I talked about the philosophies of witchcraft. I talked about the things we've been talking about, and I just approached them from a new light. The photographs, that was a struggle, because I could tell you, I don't let anyone see my temple. And the choice to photograph the altar was a choice. But I did it, and I talked to Val about it at the time, and she said, I think it was really important because you're showing them what priesthood looks like, giving them a glimpse of what priesthood looks like. And that's why we did the photos, or why Alex and Maxine did the photos or whatever. But I don't do photos of actual rituals.
Honestly, I was curious because I do have your book, Initiation into Witchcraft, and when I saw that, I knew that was a decision that could not have come lightly.
No, it was,
and so I was curious about it. I was just like, wow, like if you understand what you're seeing, like it's not sensationalized. It's extraordinarily vulnerable. Like some of the content in there is very vulnerable, but it didn't have that. We were talking a little bit about the mid-century modern witchcraft revival, where I think that some people were wonderfully but deliberately eccentric. Like, look at us, we're doing this kooky crazy thing, and it was like a little like attention seeking. But I was curious.
Well, at the time, when they were doing that, witchcraft was way more controversial than it is even now.
Yeah,
we forget there are a lot of people that still don't know about it. But I think what we tried to do with our photographs was pay homage to their work, but also reflecting like that this is a now thing,
right?
And not trying to be as sensational, because it's not going to have the effect that it once did. Like we don't have, I think Maxine said nowadays Halloween comes up and you hear something about witches on TV and you go get your tea and you don't really, it's just like, oh, I might look at this. It's not like it used to be. It used to be very shocking. So what they did, what the elders did, those women getting naked on camera or whatever, that was really a big deal. That was life altering. Like if you went on a camera as a naked witch, your life was never going to be normal after that.
In the 60s in England?
No.
Very conservative time period.
That was a real choice. I don't think what I did was as brave as what they did, but I was paying homage to it. And I wanted to show people like, hey, because people have misconceptions about what we do and their imaginations are running. So even though that wasn't like a real ritual, and they were staged photos for sure, and the altar wasn't set the way we would set it, but it just still showed them our temple, our robes, our altar, and images that were reflecting truth. And I think a picture is worth 1,000 words.
100%. What about you, Judy?
Well, I think it's because I justify it because witches don't tithe.
Yeah, fair.
We don't have, formal temples with weekly offerings. And as, leaders in the community of witchcraft, we do a lot of public works. And the public works, quite frankly, are not free. They come at great intellectual, emotional, and financial expense. And so I just need a way to balance that.
I think it's very
Did I get off on my question? What was the question? I might have gone off the deep end.
No, I was talking about like that whole public private. Like we have this allegiance to secrecy, but we're all like publishing books and putting it very much in the public.
I think it's still important.
So like, what are we really doing here, and how do we justify it?
I mean, is it for money? Is it not for money? I didn't publish my books for money because I probably would be very poor if I was just going off books. I'm not a real author. I wouldn't, you have to write a lot of books nowadays to make your money off that. You have to write tons of books. And I think writing is actually really hard. Like I like it, but it's not easy for me. It takes me about a year to turn out a book because I wrestle so much with the process. I'm ridiculous about it. So I actually admire anyone who can make their money writing occult books, for Christ's sakes. So or whatever else you do. But yeah, no one's getting rich off this, not really. Me and my husband are probably the biggest success story for making money on an occult thing, and it's not from writing books.
Right.
I do not know a wealthy occult author that's because they're writing books. Like if they're wealthy, it's for some other reason probably. But so why we're all doing it? I mean, I did it to contribute probably. Maybe a small bit for my ego.
Spilling the secrets of the craft.
Yes.
Clout.
I know. I think it's also, this is going to be super cliche, so roll your eyes at me, both of you, if you feel the need. It's also just not possible for me to share the mysteries because they're only experienced. So like, if I talk about something publicly, it's never like, I'm very proud of my husband. Like I'm going to post things about him and we're going to go out on public dates or whatever, but like, you're never going to know what it feels like to be in love with him. I mean, like, it's just not possible, right? Like, and I feel the same way about magic. Like I can show you a lot. And I do think, one of the reasons I was so strident, Brian, earlier talking about not why I hate images of working.
No, I knew what you meant, but I had to.
You had to know what I meant because I'm in.
Everyone knew what you
meant. Like, I'm literally in 2 of those pictures in your book, but in front of the altar.
I know.
The reason I don't like pictures of workings in particular, personally, and even some elders did it, so I don't want to sound like I'm judging them either, but personally why I don't like it is we live in a culture of irony. This is a postmodern culture. We're actually postmodern, right? Like it's kind of come, cultural capital right now is irony, sarcasm, judgment, nonchalance. Like those are what kind of fuel what's cool. And magic requires my full consciousness. And so I cannot give it to somebody else for them to break it by joking about it or taking it out of context or making it into a meme or like, I'm not going to do that. Right. Because it's too sacred to me. Right. Like, and there's the risk of it becoming a joke, which happens sometimes. And I'm just, I mean, I laugh with the gods aplenty, but not about that.
I like that you have that like protective impulse because I was thinking like as a person with these occult proclivities, occult basically means hidden. We do operate in secrecy, and yet here I am broadcasting on YouTube, and I'm just trying to reconcile that. Like, how do I call myself like an occult person while I'm doing a live stream or publishing a book and protected by that secrecy, cloaking yourself in the air of mystery about it, but then also revealing things for the public, for whomever. We're never in control of who or how our work is going to be received.
Or how long it'll go on.
Yeah, that's also true.
We could be 70 years old and have this podcast pop up on somebody's wall. That's what happens. I see with like Maxine or people like that. Like they didn't know that there was going to be a YouTube, and so some of the stuff that she might have done in the 70s that she thought she'd never see again, all of a sudden somebody's broadcasting. And it just happened with Christian. He had a lot of fun with it, but he did a sizzle reel for a show that never happened with some of the witches in Salem, and now it went viral all these years later, even though it never aired. Like the sizzle reel, the people who filmed it decided to put it up for Halloween, and one of the videos went viral, and so it started creating conversations around that again. So you just don't know when they're so you're putting it out there for sure. So that's why you got to watch what you say, Levi. So someone will cut that out, and I'll just
cut it out. Yeah,
be Levi saying, "I outtake." Meanwhile, the picture of him in the book,
right? I think though both of you, like
I'm
Judy,
poking at you. You're gonna get me later, I'm sure.
No, you were right. Like because I was.
No, but it's your point. We do have to reconcile it because
you do. And that's what
I'm
Judy's
the
question
same
was
as
about.
him. Like me doing that, even for me now, it's kind of like I feel like I have to apologize for having my photos. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a part of me that's like, oh God, maybe I shouldn't.
Oh,
Maybe I shouldn't have done it. But then there's the other side of me that I think, well, there's a reason for it. So there's a positive side to why we're doing this, because we're doing it for ourselves, maybe our future selves.
yeah.
And like in your next life, what is craft going to look like? What are you going to walk into in your next life that may be better represented than you had in this one? So it's all those kinds of weird nuances. I think it's important we continue to educate. Right now, the person controlling the word witchcraft on YouTube is a Christian.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And it's a Christian who's saying bad things about witchcraft. Like that is what's happening now. Because I think we started calling ourselves pagans and Wiccans, and so the word witch we're not governing that word in the educational world. So I think it's extremely important we do that again. And I challenge you all after this podcast to type in witchcraft in your YouTube and see what things come up.
See what comes up. Interesting.
Even though you'll get this because it's in your stuff now, you're going to get a lot of Christian propaganda.
Like evangelical Christian propaganda and stuff like that. Yeah, it's growing.
It wasn't like that 5 years ago.
Judy, you were talking about like this, how challenging it is and the concept of the word occult. It's also just like, something that I think Brian and I have experienced is like, when you talk to Maxine or some of the people who were present during the revival, and you'll have this conversation going on with people who never knew these people, but have seen their stuff. And they make all these assumptions. And they have these big theories where they're like, well, look at this ritual Maxine is doing. And if you see what she's doing, it represents this. And that's what Alexandrians believe. And then we've had conversations with her where she'll be like, oh, we did that for television. I made that up 5 minutes before we went on air. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and so that's
spontaneous and not disciplined.
It's context. It's context that people don't have. And she gave a speech recently. Actually, I loved both of the talks Maxine did recently. One of them is at the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle about the Alexandrian exhibit. And then one of them she did in London with Sharon. I can't remember what it was titled, but you can find them both. And she talks about not all of those pictures are equal. Some of those are moments in her life that she had a lot of agency, and she's very honest about this in her most recent talk. And some of them she didn't want to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And was bullied into. And
well, no, actually, one of the stories is the very, very famous one of her naked. One of the first ones, she didn't know the cameras were going to be there.
Yep.
Ooh,
Alex set her up.
That's like unwrapping a whole issue of like, informed consent and things like that. Wow.
She talks a lot about it.
I realized she was I think, I don't want to misquote it, but I think she was 19 at that time. She was a very young woman. So, and Alex is a bit older.
Craig makes a great point in the comments. I want to bring some of our viewers in. Craig makes a great point in the comments that I really agree with, is that witches never governed to this word except for a very brief amount of time in the last few decades. And we're losing it again.
What word?
Witch.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It was ruled by the Christians, and then it was ruled by, and then we kind of did have it for a little while.
Yeah, we gave it up.
And now it's no longer true. Brian's right. There's this huge resurgence of propaganda in social media from right-wing Christians, and it's wild to see that happen. Like another comment from our viewers is, people like Kellyanne Maddox and these people on YouTube who were ex-witches who have converted. Mm-hmm. The fall of Doreen Virtue. Does everybody remember that, when she became an evangelical and denounced all of her angel cards and everything that she had built an empire around? Her own children don't speak to her.
Wow.
Because she raised them New Age and then became an evangelical.
I just want to point out that if you look at the chat, my husband looks like the crazy person.
I see that.
Like if you didn't know who he was, I'm like, who's this crazy guy? What's he doing?
But yeah. Okay, Brian, how about you ask a question to Judy?
For both of you. So magic every day. Why do you think magic is important in your everyday life?
Magic has informed like the whole trajectory of my life. I don't think there's any undertaking that I do that doesn't have some element of manifestation and intention in it. And so I'm very deliberate in the projects that I choose, how I decide to execute them. And I think it's rooted in magic because that's who I am. I don't even think it's so much like a conscious choice where I'm not going, I will manifest this in this sort of way. It's just my impulse. And I grant myself the freedom to follow those impulses. Absolutely. It's a magical life. It has directed the trajectory of my life. You will never convince me that magic isn't real. I've had too many experiences that I cannot otherwise explain.
Levi?
I can, I can be a bit of a poo-pooer sometimes on the more and this is a cruel word that is used very disparagingly towards some people, but sort of the superstitious side of the magical community. I can get very reticent towards that. It makes me uncomfortable sometimes because I see it sort of go sour in people and create pipelines. Like the crunchy to fascist pipeline is a real thing, and a lot of people I grew up with who got into essential oils and magic ended up right-wing lunatics, so like that makes me nervous sometimes. However, big however, when I look at my life before initiation, like before and the training of magic,
like he used to dress like I am today.
I used to dress in pastels and have no joy. But
I don't believe you.
It's true, Judy. But,
I believe you. I need photographic evidence.
I will show you some
previous incarnation.
It's so much what you said, Judy, which is like, of course, it's just like people who aren't in it don't get it, right? I mean, like, I don't know how to make it true for them. I don't know how to, quench their curiosity. It's been so transformative in my life. And then magic for me is also about contact with other worlds. It's about contacts with other levels of consciousness. In Alexandrian craft, an initiation is a magic spell. Calling the quarters is an act of magic, right? It's not just I put a pin in an apple to make a boy like me. Like that can be what you do that day. Totally. We can do that in the circle if you want, 100%. But everything that built up to you putting that pin in that apple is also magic. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think a lot of modern practitioners understand that. They think that that's all just prep work. And then the magic is the thing that happens. But to me, it's like, it's the expansion of mind. It's the feeling of being connected to other intelligences, to divinity, to mind outside of my own. That I couldn't give up. I just couldn't. I mean, I couldn't imagine being some sort of like materialist philosophically after all these years. It would just be impossible. I'd have to go be a Buddhist or something, right? If I left craft, like I couldn't be anything that didn't believe in that on some level.
You'd be a very cynical Buddhist.
Girl, I'm a cynical witch. Oh God.
It is kind of a weird question because it's like sort of like the discipline question, like what do you do every day? How do you approach it? And I think the person who answered this question the best that I know of is Fiona, and she said, "Well, what's the greatest spell you've ever cast?" It was my life. So I think when you are living the magical life, which is kind of what we said this show was, it's when you stop and think about it for yourself, it is everything, isn't it? Like I'm just like a normal person. I get up. Sometimes I'm grumpy. I forget to take my water and I just go straight for the coffee or whatever it is. But I'm walking by that, and it's like, and I'm getting on this. So even on days when I'm not being conscious of my magic or the magical world, it's just in the created world around me, like you were saying, talismans and things that you interconnect with. You've created these reminders. So yeah, I can't even myself answer that question quite well because it's almost impossible.
It's like a fish explaining water.
Yeah, I look at my life as being, not to go onto a narcissistic path, but I look at the fact that, when I was 15 years old, I'm reading What Witches Do. And then I worked in a circle with the lady on the cover later. It doesn't make sense. Like none of that adds up. Like if you would have told me, come to 15-year-old Brian and said, you're going to circle with her someday, I wouldn't have believed you. I didn't even know who she was just at the time. It was somebody a long time ago in black and white. So yeah, it's a miracle. It's a little miracle. So I definitely agree with Judy that I definitely believe magic is 100% real, and I don't think you can escape it. I don't think it needs you to believe in it.
Craig in the comments said something I love. He said, it's easy even for an initiate to become skeptical until the gods whip the rug out from under you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which happens every now and then. Boop,
Constantly, really.
constantly. Yeah.
Great comment.
I love that comment. Judy, what about what do you do though? Because I love everything. Every one of us were just very big cheerleaders for the magical life, right? But I'll be vulnerable and say that it is also sometimes for me alienating, and it's harder because we don't have for example, if I was a Christian, and I've been picking on them a lot tonight in terms of conservatives, but there's a lot of progressive Christians, particularly where I live. If I was some sort of liberal Episcopalian here in New Orleans, right, and I was at St. Anna's, which is a very wonderful church in New Orleans, it's very progressive and does a lot of work for the community, I would have such an insane support network, right? And I could let somebody else do the work in church if I needed to. I could just sit there and pray, right? And just let them do the sermon, let them do the Eucharist. It's not me. I can let go. We take on, if you're going to practice the occult, you take on all the responsibility, right? You are the master of the circle when you cast it. What do you do when that leads you to a slump? What do you do, Judy, when you're exhausted by it? To reconnect?
That's a really great question, because that's something that I definitely have encountered, and that's something that I've seen a lot. When I first got into occult practices, I have roots in the Deep South, and there were a lot of little groups and circles, and it was almost like a little network of light, and I saw it as kind of like a web of love, of the resurgence of the goddess cradling the earth and lifting us all up. And then I had the good fortune and misfortune of living long enough to see almost all of those lights go out. And I've seen that ebb and flow in my own practice as well, where when I was young and I was very energetic, I was doing big public works. That was in the pre-social media days. And then when I became a mother, it was impossible. And I was really hoping that, some of the members of my group were going to step up and take on so that I could participate in things, so that I could feel that well. But what happened was then my little light also went dark. And so I don't know that I really have an answer, but I definitely have experienced that. I think it is important, to fill the well, to sit in silence, that, I work a lot with balancing the ceremonial with the more mundane elements of it. And it is difficult. It's a difficult path. When someone approaches me and they want training or something, I always take a deep breath, are you sure? And I generally tend to ignore those requests. I don't really take, a candidate seriously until they've asked several times, because I feel like it really and truly is a calling. And I love the analogy that you used about the romance, and how you can, project the image of the perfect couple, and, share your meals, and, but no one's going to know that feeling, between the two of you. So then is it worth the cost? I would say that life has taught me yes, where even in my darkest moments, where say I've just received, some terrible news, but then I have, people coming over for circle later that day. I've never canceled. I've always pushed through the ordeal. The ordeals manifest to let you know that you're on the right path, that there is something important, that the work is worthy, that the work will be hard. You have to overcome the obstacle. You have to face the challenge. And I have never, not once, gotten to the other side of an ordeal or an experience or a challenge and gone, wow, that ritual was a bad idea. No. It's always been empowering. It would be great, I think, if we had a tighter network. You mentioned the amount of support you would get if you ascribe to a Judeo-Christian congregation. That support is kind of built in because of the numbers.
Money.
Yeah, but how
it's also artificial.
Well, a lot of times I look to antiquity. I'll fill the well in the museums. You look to the ancient art and the ancient artifacts and say, as it was, so ever it shall be. And then you feel connected to that spiral of time, to that unity of humanity, to the matrilineal line, to the work of the witch, and, to the task of the priestess. And you lean into it, but it's hard.
So I was going to play a little thing with Levi real quick. Levi, you might have to take yourself back, but look where I am right now, like in the house.
Yeah.
Where's the brasso?
Did you read that in the comments?
Yes, but where's the brasso? Like in this room, where is the brasso?
What do you mean?
Whereas if you were here and you had to get the brasso.
Oh, I know where it is. It's to your right in the cupboard.
In the closet.
I knew you would love. I knew you would love that comment. He said too. Where's the brasso?
I was like, Levi's gonna still remember all these years.
Yeah,
where the
it's to your
brasso is.
right in the cupboard.
Yes, it's in my right to the cupboard.
I know
knows
you'd
the
love this
brasso
comment.
is. So
Well, someone
how
tasked with polishing candlesticks at some point.
It's a huge thing in traditional craft, Judy. People, we polish brass before circles.
Yeah. I remember
we
when
use brasso. Craig's wondering if we know what that is. Yes, we use brasso in the US too.
Okay.
If you don't know what brasso is, you're not Alexandrian.
Altar must be gleaming.
Yes.
See that it is. See that it is.
I always joked around that, Maxine and Alex picked brass as a favorite ornament, put us in white robes, and gave us lots of red wine.
It's like a punishment, right?
And everything must be clean. So, yeah. But anyway, so the question, will you reframe the question for me again? I got lost in my own.
As magical as we love our lives and whatnot, what do you do when you do feel that burden, disconnect, lack of support? Because the onus is always on you, right?
I call you at dawn and have a confessional.
It's true. That's true. So, all joking aside, are you saying you reach out to other high priesthoods?
I mean, one of the things that I think you and I do as a service for each other is we really are our confessionals. We've both done it. Like those moments where you're just like, and I'm not going to give details. Don't get scared. But, we all have those moments that, you need somebody that you can talk to. And it, used to have been my teacher, but she passed away. So, Levi and a few others. This morning it was Christine, I think. Hi, Christine. So you reach out to your peers at a certain point in time. You're like, why are we doing this? Why are we crazy people? And just because you need someone who can relate to the situation on some level. I don't have any regrets about craft. I sometimes struggle when relationships in craft sour.
Yeah.
When you spent years or a decade with people, and things go south, it's always a bit sad. Yeah. And I'd like to say it never happens and it shouldn't happen, but it does happen, and so that's very hard. And that's probably the thing I find most defeating about craft is when you have to do that. And it does break people. I used to wonder why all the teachers disappear or stop doing it. And I've wondered that through the decades of like, what happened to all these people? You'll hear about these people, and you definitely have your lifers, like, Maxine hasn't gone anywhere. She's still trekking, and if I was still alive, she'd still be trekking, but we say that in craft, and I guess the Gardnerians say it too. I didn't know that, but lifers, you've got your lifers and you've got people who they come in for whatever reason. And it's not a criticism. I think the lifers are probably we're the real ones with problems, but we're dedicated. But that's hard, but I think that's just true of human nature. You have these trials, these heartbreaks, whether it's death, whether it's, a falling out or whatever it is, and you have to kind of overcome it. And the way that I do that is by just continuing to do the work. And I realize why I do, I had a conversation with a well-known elder, and I had kind of a confessional with her, and I said, have you ever had a moment where you thought, why am I doing this? And the kind of giggle sigh in her voice answered the question. Of course I have, but she said, but I love it, and that's the truth of me too. So I've never actually thought about quitting or anything like that, but I understand why people do.
There's a comment from the steward.
Why it happens. I understand why people go, I can't do this anymore. Because it does really tax you when you give your whole worship and your soul to people, and then, they walk away or do something more. Yeah.
There's two comments I wanted to read. I love this one from Wicked Witch that says, "Oh my God, it's so hard to be different, but could you imagine being mediocre instead?" Which I think is funny.
Oh.
And then Shelby has a good one. Shelby has a good one in the comments. Wine flowing, middle of light conversation between the monks, and somebody just freezes and says, "Oh God, why the hell are we doing this?" which is true. Judy, I think it's you. Do you want to ask a question?
Okay. I would love to ask a question. So I think I'll start with Brian, if that's okay. You had mentioned, like coming into witchcraft as a teen, and in your book,
a few years
initiation-
ago. Just a few years ago.
No, yes, I know, of course. I want to say like the late 2000s, right? I know. But in your book, you mentioned, like coming into a witchcraft first through published works, like seeing books at a friend, and then I think you cited like Raymond Buckland as an early influence. But then what's your origin story? When did you make the jump from like book learning to practice? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I'm not perfect at dates, but it was a little earlier than you were kind to say. But I started reading, and I think that's one of the things I like to remind people on this show often, is I'll say it to all of us, who here didn't start by reading books? Because we all did. You know, and I like to remind the initiates of that, because I think we didn't come initiated, obviously, so you should always be kind to the new people, because you were them, I don't know what fascinated me about witchcraft to begin with, but I had exposure. I think part of it was my upbringing. There was a lot of imagination and fantasy and myth and that sort of thing. So I just was always fascinated with magic. I always liked the magical characters. If there was a show with the wizard in it, I was going to be fascinated by the wizard. It didn't matter whether they were the good guy or the bad guy. I was on their side if they were magical. But I had a friend whose mother was, I didn't know it at the time, but she was a closeted witch and a closeted lesbian, because she was a single mother, and I went to school with her son. You had to be then, really. But she had these books around her house, and so me and Michael would read them, get into them, and do stuff. So I think that was kind of where it sort of started, as far as I discovered these books. And eventually I went and purchased my Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft. Was the big changer for me. And I think I was 15 when I read that book, and it was like made my brain explode. And that's what got me addicted. And I started reading all these things. There was, and this is true of a lot of people, back in the day, the place you found people were occult stores. It's weird that I have an occult store now, but back in the day, that was the only place you really could go to. So there was a store called the Open Door Bookstore, and that's where my first witchcraft teacher, she was working there. And so I got hooked up with her when I was about 17, but she didn't start working with me until I was 18, for obvious reasons. But my mother supported it, and I started working with her. She was my first teacher, so that's how I got into it. So my first initiation was when I was about 19, I believe. And that was through her, and it was through a homegrown witchcraft no-name tradition, really.
Okay.
So, and that's how I got going. But they were practicing the religion of witchcraft. I believe that group was working from Lady Shiva's book, to be honest with you. Right. Now I know that, but at the time I didn't. So I've always kind of followed that sort of path. When I made the decision to seek further training, well, here we are. Yes. Here we are. But she's still in my life. That all those years were very pivotal. I wouldn't be who I am without those experiences. And that's why I like the phrase path of initiation. Once you go on it, you're on it. It doesn't end.
I want Levi's origin story.
God.
Whither way did you come hence?
I know, right? Whither did you come? I have a weird one, because I didn't have a lot of connection to a pagan or a witchcraft inspired world when I was younger. I was always obsessed with religion as a child, probably in an unhealthy way, to be honest. My parents were not religious. They had been raised in ridiculously religious communities. My roots are in Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia. I was born in East Tennessee, but all of my roots are in Eastern Kentucky, deep in Appalachia.
Wow.
Lots of streams of religion that most modern Americans don't even know a lot about, like Free Will Baptist and United Baptist and Apostolic Pentecostals, and like they're not as well known outside of certain communities as like the Southern Baptist Convention or Catholic, right?
Right.
And so I grew up around weird religion, and then my parents didn't like it because they were very progressive. Actually, my parents were wonderful people who were, they were very anti-racist, and they did not agree with a lot of the beliefs that they were around all the time. So they kind of let me explore. And then I will say, I have a childhood experience with witchcraft and with a set of very particular books, but I kind of keep it private because it's just weird. It's very particular how I ended up a witch when I went through this very particular experience as a child that ties to that. But I rebelled in my own way and became a Catholic. And, which was a rebellion because where I'm from, Catholicism is the whore of Babylon. It's a false religion. It's evil. It's the devil.
Where are you from, Levi?
Appalachia. Eastern Kentucky and Eastern Tennessee. But like where I'm from, it really is the devil. And so I rebelled by becoming a Catholic. And as I look back on that, though, I know it's a weird rebellion, right? But I'm kind of grateful for it on some level because I think it really did teach me to believe in ritual. The transformative power of ritual. And that, I have this thing I do that is very judgy and very bitchy, to be frank, where if I look at a hideous Protestant church, I'm like, God's not showing up there. God's not coming. Why would she?
I still remember when you threw that holy water on me.
I did in Portugal.
Did it sizzle?
Oh, was it Bath? I thought it was Bath you did that.
No, it was Portugal. It was in Sintra. But I have that experience, Judy, of like, and then that all came tumbling down, obviously, because of how wicked and conservative and horrid it is. And being a queer man and everything. And then I tried to be a non-believer. I really wanted to be an atheist. I was like, I wanted it to liberate me from, because I had been obsessed with religion my whole life. I was so sick of it. And so I went through this phase where I was like reading the New Atheists. And for a long time when I was in college, my banner on Facebook, when that was still a thing, was just the words "no thanks" and the T was a crucifix. I was so angry, right? And then I had certain experiences that I also keep private that corresponded to what had happened to me when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And it made me a lifer in this religion, because if you told any version of me in high school or whatever that I was going to be a high priest of a coven of witches in New Orleans doing witchcraft on, what I mean? I would have lost my mind. Like, I would have been horrified. I didn't know
you were gay yet either, so it'd be gay.
Oh.
No, honey, everybody in the Helen Keller would have known I was gay. But like, I don't know. There's something about it, Judy, that like the jump to practice for me just happened like a calling. And I hesitate to use that word sometimes because I think that can be tricky, but I just think I was fated to be here. And the gods are just like, you're not leaving, sugar. Like, even if you want to, even if you get
exhausted. Thank you for your candor. That's like, that's an amazing share out. And I really find it fascinating because I was raised with a lot of Catholicism too. And I can absolutely attribute like my love of ritual because I've been doing it my whole life. So like when you come up in a Catholic faith, you are taught ritual. You are taught transformational blood magic, basically. Like I've been doing blood magic since I was 8. So witchcraft doesn't seem that
strange. When it's supposed to be, right? Like,
yeah.
We had a Hex Fest. I believe I was there for that. We had a Hex Fest. I don't know if you were at this one, but we got protested by some Catholics. And it was really funny because the witches actually quite enjoyed it because they were out there. And so there were all these witches who used to be Catholic, and they were like saying the rosary with the people who were just out there. And Levi's like, you got to admit, Brian, as a protest, they're just holding up Mary and saying a rosary. Like, it's kind of not really that bad.
I want to hear your full story, Judy, but do you care? We do have a caller if you want to.
Please. Let's enjoy the call in, please. Yes.
Hi, you're on Covendom. Who is this?
Hi, Levi. Blessed be Brian. It's Shelby.
I made him call in. I texted him.
Did you text him? Shelby, what question?
I wanted to see the phone work.
What question do you have for the panel, Shelby?
So, not to kind of backtrack a little bit, but kind of going over like the middle of the night conversations kind of thing, line flowing. What I'm curious for, like, all of y'all's not necessarily information, but lack of a better term. What has there ever been like one time in particular where like you're either in a circle, whether it's like private or like a public ritual that you've gone into, and you can just like tell some people are there just for the sake of trying to see and suss out like if it's all fake?
Oh, like seekers.
Or skeptics too.
Seekers in the sense of like they're seeking for like if they're there to make sure that it's all fake.
Okay, skeptics.
Yes. And then the sense of like, that they're skeptics, and then afterwards they come and ask, oh, well, why didn't a god or goddess, or why didn't the gods show up? Why didn't any magic actually happen?
Okay, I like this question. So, Judy, do you want to start? What do you do when you have those kind of skeptics who come kind of with bad intentions?
I kind of let the magic speak for itself. One of my favorite moments was at Hex Fest a couple years ago, where I was doing a workshop on priestess path. And so it was like for people that were like interested in priesthood, like what that looked like, what that felt like, and me sharing it through an ecstatic group ritual. So there was a moment where I turned to the center of the circle and I invoked the goddess, and the chandelier started flickering like mad. And as magic workers, like, we accept that like as a manifestation. Sometimes you get the clap of thunder, sometimes you get the spider descending. There's usually some kind of manifestation, but there isn't always, but it's always very thrilling when there is. So then that moment got like a little bit of buzz. And when I returned to Hexfest the next year, people were still talking about it, like, oh, when she did the invocation to the goddess, the chandelier started flickering. And so it was like the next year, and I was doing something similar, and in the same room at the same moment at the invocation, it happened again. So all these people that came because they heard about the thing that happened, like, then got to witness it. So I have people like come and show up to see, like, is she really, going to make the lights flicker? Or are we going to get, the clap of thunder? And so, like, absolutely yes and yes. Like,
what about you, Brian?
Well, for some reason, what came to mind, and I think Shelby may have been there for that. You might have been here for this too, Levi. I don't really remember. We had a ritual. This is not quite the question, but we had a ritual that we were filming for some show that was coming through here that never aired, which happens. But I remember this story because we were doing the ritual in the temple at Hex. Some of the witches were there. I don't remember who was there right now. But for whatever reason, I only allowed the cameraman to be in. I didn't allow anyone else to be in. And we did a ritual. And at the end, he was really shooken up. And he said to us, I don't believe any of this. I don't know what that was, but he was telling everyone, like, I felt something in there with those guys. They brought something in. He was like, his hairs were all standing up. He's like, I'm a skeptic, but something was going on there. He was like super freaked out. But for the rest of us, it was normal, normal stuff. But I don't know why that came to mind. Were one of you guys there for that, or was it all different?
I wasn't here for this one, I don't think.
I feel like Shelby
was. I was there. I wasn't initiated yet. I was just in management, so I had everybody else showing up.
Shelby, I'm going to go a different direction than Judy and Brian, and quote the Bible. As
you do.
I think a lot about Jesus' statement of, I don't throw pearls before swine, right? So, like, if somebody comes and I have put so much effort into something and they're like, well, it didn't work for me. And oftentimes it is nasty. There's a lot of like I said, we live in this ironic post-truth society, and people love to pick and unknit and deconstruct and whatnot. And I was a French major. I've had enough deconstruction for a lifetime. I think I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, I'm so sad for you. The gods don't show up for you. That's such a pity. They do for me. It's like, and that's just kind of my attitude sometimes. I don't bend spoons for anyone. I'm not a spoon bender, and so when people are like, prove it, I'm like, prove this, I've just kind of like I've went too far in my initiation now, and I've talked to the gods too many times for you to come and tell me they're not real. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. I just laugh it off.
It's like, I can't experience this for you. I can't give you this experience if you're not open to it. If you're not open to it, there's nothing performative on my end that is going to give you that experience if you've already closed yourself off. And I mean, I've definitely experienced
and then
that.
And now look at the chandelier.
But still, like there is that. I mean, it's not always like the skeptic, but I have encountered like another type of person that no matter what I am, I'm not going to be what their version of me or what I'm doing should be. Yes. So like if I'm invoking Isis, I'm not going to apologize for not being like an Egyptologist or an Egyptian scholar. And they'll come at me with, well, did you know X, Y, and Z? I'm like, well, I'm actually not up here as a scholar. And so if you need to make yourself feel smart and to make me feel dumb to validate you, that's kind of a you thing. But it does get very tiresome. It's like an energy drain where I did end up like kind of stepping away from public ritual because I was tired of running that gauntlet of not just like the skeptics, but the people that like, believe something different or believe that I should be doing something different or that I don't have the right to be doing what I'm doing because I'm not credentialed in their mind. I'm not like, just so why do I have this effigy? If I don't know all the history behind it. I know enough, but not enough for some people.
I love that what you just said, Judy. I have a stock answer that I use for that. When people say, well, what gives you the right to? I just stop them and I go, oh, I'm a priest.
Yeah.
I'm a priest. Yeah. And that's the end of the conversation. I could give.
That was something that came up a lot when I was writing my first book, because really Christian was the taskmaster. But I got really frustrated sometimes because he knew the game. But he would be like, well, where's your source? And I'm like, I'm the source. I'm a priest. I'm the source. But I learned why you have to have sources, because that is the thing. Like, you can know what you're talking about, but there's always going to be it's always going to be men usually that need to have this like conversation about history and what is this and that. And they will come at you, particularly if you write a book. They want to know everything, Right. How do you know that rock's green?
I'm not going to take advice on how to talk to the gods by people who don't believe in them.
Exactly. That's
That's just silly.
Something tells me, Judy, however, when you read someone back, it's probably deliciously fun to watch.
I do get that vibe from Judy too. Where I'm like, you're so kind, but it's kindness in a way that I feel could be delivered in a beautiful poison berry. You know what I mean?
Aquame is a double-edged blade, and use both. Use both.
Shelby, did we answer your question?
Yes, and I loved all of your answers.
Well, thank you for calling in. Blessed be.
Blessed be, Shelby. Thanks. One of the things that he brought up that came to my brain was what I've mostly encountered. I'm sure we've had skeptics come to rituals or whatever, but it's more when I get adversarial spirits. Like someone's there to check us out.
To disrupt. Or something, or to disrupt.
That's happened a few times in my life, but they're usually quickly dealt with. So...
Yeah, and I like what you were talking about, Judy, where this is something I talk about all the time. So maybe if you all have thoughts on this, we're nearing the end anyway. But like, I don't think a lot of people in our community understand the place of scholarship in magic, because every other major religion on earth has this distinction between the ability to study something historical, sociological, archaeological, or something theological. So like, if I'm a Christian, I can go to a divinity school where I can get training in biblical studies. I can get training in Hebrew linguistics. I can get training in early.
You have your choice.
But my professors believe in Jesus, right?
Yeah.
That's the difference, though. My professors believe in Jesus. Whereas as a witch or a pagan, you want to study the old gods, or you're going to get your sources from non-believers. Yes. And that just puts us in this weird position where I do think we over honor certain types of scholarship, and it's like, and how pro scholarship I am, like I'm obsessed with it. It was, but like, it's not religion. Like, it's not religion. Like, if you can tell me exactly what, ISIS, how ISIS was worshipped in Cume in this particular year, what great for you, but like, that's not the same thing as invoking her.
Right.
I just think there's a tension there in our community that we haven't figured
I
out.
remember it was some kind of seeker soiree something that went on at one point in time. And it ended with just me and this one woman. And she started trying to school me about certain really strange things. I don't really, the context doesn't matter. But when I put the sword to her, basically, and I was like, you don't know what you're talking about, this, blah, blah, blah. But she's like, well, I have a degree in this. And I said, well, you're not a priest, though. Like, like, I'm a priest. Like, I don't care about your degree in this thing you have. It has nothing to do with the subject. Would you sit down with a Catholic priest and tell them about Catholicism because you have a degree in whatever it was, comparative religion or whatever she had? So that credential doesn't fly here. Sorry.
No, that's fascinating. It's a bit like swimming, right? Like you can watch videos of someone swimming. You can read on like the stats of like Michael Phelps's wingspan, and you can call yourself an expert, but until you get in the pool,
that's exactly
what do you know about swimming?
I never saw her again. Don't know what happened to her. But I thought it was a really strange moment because it was an intimate conversation. Right. So she was being very rude, but at least it was in an intimate situation to where it was just me and her. So it wasn't really that rude. But it was weird how shocked she was that I felt like I had any knowledge at all.
Wow.
We have a comment that you would like that says, seekers sometimes do this thing where they say they want initiation when they really want therapy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And or you could replace it by like validation. Like a lot of people aren't actually coming to magic for magic.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the no socializing rule works out for us, because it deters people from, that makes them realize in our groups that they're not getting a community.
And this is not that.
Yeah, we're not here to be your friend, basically, which I think people think is harsh, but without that, that's what you get. You get people who want a new pseudo family, or they want a new group. And I'm not saying we don't have, Levi's basically family to me at this point, but it took a lot of trauma for us to get here.
We're trauma bonded like real families.
Just like family.
Just like real people.
Really?
Judy, I'll ask you this because it's like playing off of this comment a little bit, because somebody else has one I like, the phrase, the word killeth, the spirit maketh alive. This idea that witchcraft only as a praxis, divorced from religion. Brian and I sort of that's been our eternal clarion call for everything we do, is like witchcraft has a religious component, invocation, prayer, the goddess, all of it. Do you see this, like some tension growing in the community about this, where people want to reject all that and just have this very cause and effect system?
Well, this is really similar to a question I was hoping to get to ask you and Brian as well, is that I am definitely very much, I would even go so far as to say painfully aware of this schism that's developed. And I want to say that it's recent, because when I was coming of age in the craft, witchcraft was synonymous with the divine feminine and goddess. And now I'm seeing like a rejection of that, where like I've gotten criticized for my books, like, oh, this isn't about real witchcraft. This is religious. This is, this is Wiccan, or this is whatever. And I was like, oh, what do you think that is then? What do you think that is? Is it just the pin in the apple without the calling of the quarters? And I'm interested in this question. I don't know that I have an answer, but I find it a fascinating question. Like, how much of what we do is the ceremonial like high magic, as as we call it, versus like the down and the dirty, like spellcraft, manifesting, because they're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. They're related. For my own part, like I do both, right? But say like the the effigies and the wax candles, like in the shop, you can use those in ceremonial magic, but that's not the magic. And so if you are not, like tapping in to that higher power, what really are people doing? Like, are you seeing that too? Because to me, like, that schism is kind of new, where people are, very individualistic trend I'm seeing.
It's very American.
Very much so.
Something you just said, Judy, I think is really important to realize is historically, yes, there would have been a difference between the person working grimoire magic and the person working folk magic. You know a difference they wouldn't have had? They both would have believed in God.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Folk magic was intercessory, right? You were talking to gods if you were doing pagan folk magic. You were talking to angels, saints, or Jesus if you're doing Christian folk magic. You were talking to Loa or Orishas, whatever your particular tradition is. Nobody until a post-Enlightenment, Blavatsky-inspired sort of New Age was talking to intuition, right? There was always the divine,
Right.
you know, and it was complex and messy and wild. But so I think that's what I look at is I'm like, this is entirely new. This idea that witchcraft is just some sort of secret, super special science that nobody understands. That's not an old belief at all. It's very modern, right? You know, 1800s maybe, you know, at the earliest. So I think, you know, I just don't think there is such a thing. So like, you know, Rodriguez Mystic, one of our viewers, says, I definitely see a divide between religious deity worshipping witches and then a side and another side that says, whether it's true or not, that says that they don't do that. They only work about with the land, the dead, or spirits of place. But, and he's not saying he believes this. If correct me if I'm wrong, Rodriguez, but you're saying you see that like Judy's talking about this modern schism. I throw it back at them. Tell me in what way the land being conscious or the dead surviving death or spirits of place really existing is not religious.
Right. They insist that it's not.
But it is.
Definitely.
And religious scholars insist that it is.
Yeah. Because it is.
Because it is. It's just a terror that people have of the R word. They don't want to be called religious. And it's like, I don't care about that. Like, and in a weird way, I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox, I'm being rude, but like in a weird way, in a desperate attempt to not sound like Christians, they are ceding the entire conversation to Christians. And it's like, that makes no sense to me. There's
more than one thing going on here. So the fun anecdote, because I want to promote Judy's work, which there's a lot of. But so I'll be very quick. Fun story I liked about this comet is I had a soiree in Massachusetts and a strange woman who kept coming to everything. It was very strange. We'll leave it at that. Stood up, and you know, they'll say they have a question, but really it was just a comment. And her comment was, because I'd been discussing Alexandrian witchcraft, and she said, well, you keep talking about witchcraft like it's a religion. I don't think it is a religion. I think it's a practice. And I was like, lots of people do. That was my, I was like, lots of people do. She goes, well, I have another question. And I said, okay, what is it? She goes, well, I've noticed my spells don't work. And I said, perhaps you need God.
I have
practice
to
harder.
Yes. I'm never going to pass it to Judy to end.
No, I want to give a more important thing, though, because I've been actually looking at this recently, not only as a business owner, but just as a particular person interest. I was thinking about this even as a demonstration, and there's so many things you could call out, but I'm going to make this very simple. And this is somebody who owns witchcraft stores, but it is easier for a corporation to make money if you believe magic is secular than it is for a corporation to make money if you think it's a religion. So I believe people who are controlling this trend are people like Amazon.com, and I think society is dumb. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay.
There's a couple comments I'll throw up before we pass it to Judy to end with, but because just to get our viewers involved, I love some of these comments. Bella said, real secular people don't believe they have magical powers, which is so true. Like if you really weren't religious and you're totally secular in your practice, you wouldn't believe you could do magic, right? Like that's not something secularism teaches.
That is a valid point.
Yeah, the Stewart review, I love this comment. It's dangerous to make Christianity synonymous for religion. It's not. Like, how come they're allowed to be religious and we're not? You know, which I think is absolutely true.
Rights. Why would we want rights?
It's just like Rodriguez Mystic brings up. It's just like when people say Buddhism isn't a religion, even though all devout Buddhists in East Asia say it is. Yeah. It's just white people in the West.
I kind of was trying to get into everyone's brain, and I'm just going to leave this here because I could really go into this. Who benefits from witchcraft not being a religion? Who benefits from that?
People with something to sell.
Also people who don't want us to have any influence, any power, or any rights. You know, like if witchcraft is a religion, we have rights, which we do because it is actually a federally recognized religion. One of my points in my book, like, I don't care if you don't think it's a religion, it's federally, many countries have legally said it is. So, blah, blah, blah. But you lose that. What are you fighting against? Depowering yourself. Right. So even if you don't think witchcraft is a religion, why are you shooting yourself in the foot? Like, why are you cannibalizing this movement that could protect you for something you don't actually benefit from? You don't want to believe in God. You don't want to be a goddess. I don't care.
You need to do
who benefits from it? You're not going to benefit from it, right? So no one good benefits from that argument.
The comments are
Christians benefit from it. Amazon.com benefits from it.
The comments are, I've never seen them come in this quickly. People really have a lot of very strong opinions about this. I think it's fascinating.
Let Judy have the microphone now. Judy, you've written a lot of books, so I couldn't mention all of them, but please tell us.
Don't. It would take too long.
About what you want to promote right now.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to announce that I just moved a new title into Prophet, which for a working author is huge. So I welcome and I appreciate the opportunity to promote the Modern Witchcraft Guide to Crystal Magic, the one book I got to write with pure joy, available wherever books are sold, including Barnes & Noble, because Jeff Bezos does not need your money. So it is on Amazon, but you don't need to get it there. You can request it at an independent bookstore, and you can go to your local library and request it there. So you don't even have to spend any money, but the library will buy it. Modern Witchcraft Guide to Crystal Magic. Yes, thank you.
And where can people find you, Judy?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is @Transister. So that's TRANCESISTER. So I will be happy to interact with everyone on Instagram @Transister.
And check out her music too, Saint Divine.
Yes, Saint Divine.
Psychopositive.
Saint Divine and Psychopositive. I've got 2 different bands, and they're both amazing. I don't know why these people collaborate with me and put up with me, but I am super grateful that they do.
It's actually been a very fun episode. I've actually really enjoyed this season, Levi. We've had some really great.
This was such a good episode, Judy. I'm so glad you were here.
Yes, it was very nice. She's a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. You can see her at WitchCon. You can be at WitchCon.
I will be at WitchCon, yes.
And then HexFest too, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will be returning. Very happy to be returning.
We will share wine then and have really naughty conversations that are not suitable for the public.
Can't wait.
Next week, I don't remember what the topic is right now, but next week our special guest will be Felissa. She is a Guardianarian High Priestess who will be joining us for the first time on Covendom. So we'll see you all next week.
Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Blessed solstice.
Yes. Happy solstice.
Happy solstice.